Everyone told me the pressure and the nighttime trips were just something you accept once your prostate starts growing. A pill, a shrug, and a life quietly built around knowing where every bathroom is. I believed that for the better part of 30 years. It was never the full story. A large share of men past 50 carry some degree of an enlarged prostate, and almost nobody sits us down to explain what actually feeds that swelling day after day, or that what's sitting in your own refrigerator has more to do with it than any pill ever will. I found that out the hard way, standing in my own kitchen at 83, staring into a refrigerator I'd stocked the exact same way for 30 years, having no idea that half of what was in there was quietly working against the pressure I felt every single night. Most men assume the discomfort is just something you live with once the gland starts growing. It almost never has to stay that way. I still get my checkups every year, still let my doctor run whatever tests he wants, and I still sit in that waiting room without the old knot in my stomach. I make it through a full round of cards with my neighbors on Friday nights now without excusing myself twice before the second hand is even dealt. I'm not telling you that to brag. I'm telling you because 2 years ago I would have made an excuse and stayed home. What changed wasn't a pill, and it wasn't luck. It was what ended up on my plate, and I'm going to walk you through exactly what I found and why it holds up. For years I told myself the swelling and the constant bathroom trips were simply what happens when a man gets old. My doctor, with 8 minutes a visit and a full waiting room, would note it, tell me it was common, and move to the next thing on his list. I don't blame him. That's just the math of a busy practice. But it left me eating the same way I'd eaten since my 40s, never once connecting my dinner plate to the pressure keeping me up at night. What I eventually learned changed how I looked at every meal. The prostate is living tissue, and living tissue responds to what feeds it: inflammation, hormones, the raw materials circulating through your blood. Certain foods calm that tissue down. Others keep it agitated for decades without you ever noticing the connection. Once I understood that, my kitchen stopped being neutral ground. It became either part of the problem or part of the answer, meal by meal. I want to be clear that I'm not talking about some rare superfood flown in from a jungle somewhere, and I'm not talking about a pill you swallow and forget about. I'm talking about groceries. Ordinary, unglamorous groceries that most stores already carry, and that most of us walked right past for decades without ever connecting them to the pressure keeping us up at 3 in the morning. That disconnect is really the whole problem in a nutshell. We treat the plate and the body like two separate stories when they've been the same story the entire time. For years, one number ran my life: the PSA. It would tick up a point and I'd lie awake the whole night certain it meant the worst, picturing the biopsy, the knife, the end of everything. Then someone finally told me the truth no doctor had. That number doesn't measure cancer. It measures your prostate. And as we age, it climbs mostly because the gland is simply enlarging, benign, swollen, and uncomfortable, not the worst. The number was scaring me half to death over something ordinary. And the prescriptions they push to shrink it? They can flatten your drive completely, soften everything, quietly take the man right out of you. I wasn't willing to trade that away. There's a gentle way to support that gland, keep it comfortable, a healthy size, without surrendering any of that. Keep getting checked every year, of course. At 83, that number doesn't own me anymore. I finally have peace. Let me show you what gave it to me in this video. And if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. Here's what I found once I actually went looking, food by food, the way an old man with time on his hands and a real reason to care finally does his homework. The first is the tomato, and specifically the compound inside it called lycopene, the pigment that gives tomatoes their deep red color. Cooked tomatoes, the kind in a simple sauce or a stew, not raw slices on a sandwich, release far more of this compound than raw ones do, because heat breaks down the plant cell walls that normally trap it. Research has repeatedly linked higher lycopene intake to better markers of prostate health, and the mechanism makes sense once you know it. Lycopene is one of the most potent antioxidants found in the produce aisle, and it appears to calm the same low-grade inflammation that keeps prostate tissue swollen and irritated. I started cooking a simple tomato sauce twice a week instead of buying the jarred version loaded with sugar, and it became the anchor of everything else I changed. The second is broccoli, and its cousins in the cruciferous family: cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. These vegetables contain a compound called sulforaphane, released when you chop or chew them, and studies looking at men who eat cruciferous vegetables regularly have found associations with better prostate tissue health compared to men who rarely touch them. I steam mine now instead of boiling the life out of them the way my mother did, because a hard boil strips away a good portion of what makes them worth eating in the first place. The third is pumpkin seeds, a small handful eaten as a snack instead of chips or crackers. They carry plant compounds called phytosterols, along with a meaningful dose of zinc, a mineral found in higher concentration in healthy prostate tissue than almost anywhere else in the body. Men have used pumpkin seeds traditionally for urinary comfort for generations, and while I'll be honest that the largest clinical trial on pumpkin seed alone didn't show a dramatic difference against a placebo, the mechanism is sound, and the seeds themselves are cheap, real food with no downside. I keep a jar on the counter now instead of the bowl of pretzels that used to sit there. The fourth is fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, for the omega-3 fatty acids they carry. These fats have a well-documented general anti-inflammatory effect throughout the body, and a body running cooler on inflammation tends to carry less pressure in tissue that's already sensitive, prostate tissue included. I started having sardines on toast for lunch twice a week, which sounds unglamorous, and is, and works anyway. I'll say plainly that the research connecting omega-3 fats to prostate health specifically is still being worked out, and I'm not going to pretend it's settled science. What is settled is that these fats calm inflammation broadly across the body, and a calmer body tends to be a more comfortable one, prostate included. The fifth is green tea, specifically for its polyphenols, plant compounds studied for their anti-inflammatory effect on prostate tissue specifically. One mechanism I found genuinely interesting is that certain green tea compounds appear to act locally, right in the tissue itself, without lowering testosterone throughout the rest of the body, which matters because so many men fear that anything touching the prostate is going to cost them something else. I swapped my afternoon coffee for a cup of green tea most days, not eliminating coffee, just trading one of the two. The sixth is walnuts and other nuts carrying beta-cytosterol, a plant compound studied specifically for its association with easing urinary symptoms tied to an enlarged prostate. A small handful, a few times a week, worked into what I was already eating rather than added as some separate regimen. The seventh is onions and apples, for a flavonoid called quercetin, a compound tied in emerging research to calming inflammation specifically in the lower urinary tract. I started slicing raw onion into salads instead of leaving it out, and kept an apple in my jacket pocket the way I used to when I was young enough to still be working. None of these 7, eaten once, changed anything. What worked was treating them as a system I built slowly, over months, the way an 83-year-old body actually tolerates change, not a crash diet, not a supplement stack shipped from overseas promising a miracle. Boring, repeated, connected to the rest of my health instead of separated from it. I remember the first time I sat through an entire community theater show without needing the aisle seat near the exit, the one I'd claimed out of habit for years without ever admitting why. These days I take my wife on the long drive out to my son's place 3 states over without mapping every rest stop along the interstate first. And that kind of freedom means more to me at 83 than almost anything else I could name. I want to be honest with you about something, because this channel isn't here to frighten you into anything. An enlarged prostate is not cancer, and eating better doesn't mean you get to skip a single visit to your doctor. Keep getting checked every year on schedule, with your doctor watching the things he's trained to watch. What I changed was what fed my own comfort day to day. What he watches is a separate, essential job, and both matter. I told him exactly what I'd started eating, tomato by tomato, and he didn't tell me to stop any of it. He just kept doing his part while I finally started doing mine. There was a man at my church, Elias, 71, who'd been managing the same nighttime pressure for almost a decade before his daughter finally printed out a list like the one I just walked you through and taped it to his refrigerator door. He told me later he thought it was nonsense, cooked tomatoes and green tea doing anything for a body that old. He'd tried a supplement 2 years earlier that promised the world and delivered nothing, and he wasn't in a hurry to fall for another promise. 6 months in, he wasn't arguing anymore. He wasn't cured. He was just a man who could get through a round of golf without excusing himself at every other hole, which for him, at 71, felt like getting a piece of his life back. He told me the hardest part wasn't the eating. It was believing something so ordinary could actually matter. And I understood that completely, because I'd needed a diner conversation and a full year of proof before I believed it myself. Here's what I settled on: a few drops a day. And let me tell you why it works. One compound calms one signal, but a swollen prostate answers when several are calmed at once: the growth signal, the inflammation, the pressure inside it. So what I use concentrates them, working as one, the way the research actually uses them, not a single ingredient pretending to be enough. A gland that stays comfortable and a healthy size, fewer trips, and the quiet of no longer fearing that number. It leaves the man fully intact, none of that flattening the prescriptions can do. It's linked right under this video, go look for yourself. It won't replace your doctor or your yearly check. It supports the biology right alongside them. I'm 83, and that number doesn't own me anymore. What I want you to walk away with is this. You don't need to overhaul your whole life overnight, and you don't need to chase some rare ingredient flown in from the other side of the world. 7 ordinary foods, most of them already sitting in your grocery store, can genuinely support the comfort of a gland that's been quietly working against you for years, while you keep doing the one thing that actually matters most, which is staying in your doctor's chair every year, not running from it. I think about the man I was a few years back, turning down invitations because he didn't trust his own body past an hour from home, quietly assuming that was simply how the rest of his life would go. And I think about the man I am now, saying yes without doing the math first, trusting an afternoon to his own body again. That's not a miracle sitting on a plate. That's just a body finally being given the raw materials it needed, when somebody finally sat down and explained what it had been reacting to all along. If any part of this sounds like your own kitchen, your own nights, tell me in the comments what you've already tried, what just aging has cost you. I read every one myself. And if this changed even a little of how you look at your next meal, subscribe, because I've got a lot more of what I've learned still to share with you.